Earth's dreadnoughts emerged from the darkness of space, massive and ominous, their presence sending a ripple of terror through the ranks of the Galactic Fleet. The victorious armada had stood in celebratory formation mere moments ago, their officers and soldiers relishing what they believed was the final conquest of humanity. Their banners had flown proudly, their warships had shone with the brilliance of victory, but now that triumph felt hollow. The battlefield they had so thoroughly dominated now belonged to something else. Something that had waited in silence. Something that had just arrived. The dreadnoughts were unlike any vessels the Galactic Fleet had ever encountered. They bore none of the familiar design aesthetics of any known civilization. There were no sleek lines, no delicate curves, no ornamentation that suggested artistry or decadence. These ships were raw instruments of war, their brutal, angular forms shaped solely for destruction. Their hulls absorbed the light of nearby stars, swallowing their radiance into an abyss of matte black armor. They exuded an overwhelming sense of purpose. These were not exploratory vessels, nor were they diplomatic envoys. They had come for a singular reason. Silence stretched between the two forces. The Galactic Fleet, once proud in its dominance, hesitated. Its commanders and admirals struggled to comprehend the sheer scale of what stood before them. The largest battleships in their fleet were dwarfed by these monstrous warships, their flagship reduced to insignificance beneath the shadow of the dreadnoughts. Communications officers frantically attempted to establish contact, but no response came. No threats. No ultimatums. The humans did not waste words. They did not need to. The fleet's high command watched as the first dreadnought moved. It did not rush. It did not falter. It advanced with terrifying precision, each of its movements deliberate. Its hull was adorned with weaponry of unknown design, massive batteries of cannons and sleek arrays of energy weapons that pulsed with barely contained power. Scanners struggled to interpret the readings. Whatever these weapons were, they operated on principles beyond the Galactic Fleet's current understanding. The energy signatures were impossibly high, far exceeding any classification within the Empire's vast knowledge. Even the most advanced vessels in the fleet had never demonstrated firepower on this scale. Tension spread like wildfire through the ranks of the Galactic Fleet. Officers barked conflicting orders, some demanding an immediate retreat, others insisting that the fleet maintain formation and hold its ground. Fear crackled across communication channels, breaking the once orderly structure of their command hierarchy. Some captains hesitated, their instinct screaming at them to flee, but their training held them in place. They had never lost a battle before. They had never faced an enemy they could not subjugate. The thought that they might be outmatched was an alien concept. And yet, every instinct, every reading, every alarm in their ships told them that they were no longer in control. The first shot was fired. It came from one of the dreadnoughts, a single lance of energy so precise and so immediate that the Galactic Fleet barely had time to react. The beam tore through the void, its brilliance momentarily blinding their sensors. A flagship of the Empire, one of its most formidable warships, was the first to fall. It did not erupt in a blaze of fire. It did not shatter into debris. It simply ceased to exist. The beam lanced through its core, bypassing its shields, bypassing every layer of reinforced armor as if they were mere illusions. One moment it was there, and the next, there was nothing. Panic erupted through the Galactic Fleet. Officers screamed into their communicators, issuing emergency maneuvers, desperate to understand what had just happened. Some ships attempted to break formation, engines flaring as they sought to put distance between themselves and the newcomers. Others charged weapons, preparing for a battle they had not anticipated. The dreadnoughts did not pause. They did not wait for a response. They had arrived with purpose, and that purpose was destruction. More beams fired, each one targeting a different vessel. Each one striking with surgical precision. The Galactic Fleet's defenses, which had crushed countless civilizations before, proved useless against this unseen force. Shields overloaded instantly, armor plating melted away like wax before a flame. The once mighty warships of the Empire, the same fleet that had been celebrating victory moments ago, were now little more than prey caught in a storm they had never prepared for. The dreadnoughts moved forward, relentless, unwavering, their formations flawless. Unlike the Galactic Fleet, which was now descending into chaos, the human warships exhibited a terrifying level of coordination. There were no wasted movements. There was no hesitation. Every action was calculated, every attack a precise execution of overwhelming force. The enemy had spent years believing themselves to be the dominant force in the galaxy. They had spent generations conquering, subjugating, wiping out those who stood against them. But now, they faced an enemy that had not been crushed beneath their boots. An enemy that had not been broken. An enemy that had simply waited until it was ready to strike. Aboard the flagship, the admiral of the Galactic Fleet stood frozen, his mind racing to find a solution. The Empire had underestimated humanity. Intelligence reports had stated that Earth's military strength had been exhausted, that their fleets had been reduced to scattered remnants. That was why they had declared victory so soon. That was why they had allowed themselves to celebrate. But now, as he stared at the silent, merciless dreadnoughts, he realized the truth. Earth had never been weak. Earth had never been desperate. They had simply been hiding their true strength, waiting for the moment their enemy was at its most vulnerable. The Galactic Fleet was no longer the hunter. It was no longer the unchallenged force it had once believed itself to be. They had entered this battle believing they were the victors. But now, they stood face to face with something that dwarfed them in every way. The realization settled upon the admiral like a crushing weight. The Empire had not won. The war had never been over. The enemy had simply allowed them to believe it was. And now, as the dreadnoughts advanced, as their weapons prepared to fire again, the Galactic Fleet understood that they were not witnessing a desperate retaliation. They were witnessing an execution. The Galactic Fleet had basked in its triumph, its admirals reveling in the belief that humanity had been crushed under the might of their superior forces. The last remaining resistance had been swept aside, their fleets shattered, their colonies burned to cinders. What was left of Earth's forces had scattered to the fringes of the galaxy, hunted down with ruthless efficiency. The once feared human military had been reduced to a whisper, a lingering memory of defiance. The Empire had celebrated its dominance, the fleet gathering in formation to mark the end of yet another victorious campaign. Then the dreadnoughts arrived. They came from the void, appearing without warning, their dark forms emerging against the backdrop of distant stars. At first, the Galactic Fleet's commanders dismissed them as wreckage, perhaps remnants of the human armada that had been annihilated. But the readings told a different story. These ships were operational, their engines burning cold, their weapons online. They did not respond to hails. They did not broadcast surrender. They simply advanced. The dreadnoughts were colossal, their sheer size dwarfing even the Empire's largest battleships. Their hulls were reinforced with unknown materials, absorbing the light around them and making it difficult to discern their exact shape. Their weapon systems were unlike anything the Galactic Fleet had encountered before, the energy readings fluctuating wildly, as if they operated on principles outside the Empire's understanding. The High Command had no record of these vessels. They had not been part of any known fleet. And yet, they moved with intent, with precision, as if they had been waiting for this moment. The Admiral of the Galactic Fleet hesitated. There had been no indication that humanity had anything left, certainly nothing of this scale. The intelligence reports had been thorough, meticulous in their analysis of Earth's remaining resources. The humans should have been broken. The war should have been over. And yet, the dreadnoughts moved forward, their presence an undeniable reality. The Admiral issued a command. The Galactic Fleet would stand its ground. The first shot was fired, a brilliant streak of energy that carved through the void like a blade of light. It came from the lead dreadnought, a single, precise strike that targeted one of the Empire's flagships. Shields flared in response, alarms blaring as the ship's defenses engaged at full power. But it made no difference. The energy lance burned through layers of armor, slicing through the ship's core. There was no explosion, no debris scattered into space. The flagship was simply gone, erased from existence in an instant. Panic rippled through the Galactic Fleet. Captains barked orders, weapons systems activated in unison, targeting the dreadnoughts with everything they had. Beams of energy and volleys of torpedoes filled the space between them, a cascade of destruction meant to overwhelm the enemy before they could strike again. But the dreadnoughts remained untouched. The attacks struck their hulls, dissipating upon impact as if they were no more than a gentle breeze against a mountain. The Galactic Fleet's most advanced weaponry, technology that had laid waste to countless worlds, was useless. The dreadnoughts retaliated. More beams fired, each one finding its target with terrifying precision. One by one, the Galactic Fleet's warships were wiped from existence. There were no dogfights, no desperate last stands. There was only execution. Every maneuver the fleet attempted, every evasive action, was countered with cold efficiency. The Dreadnoughts did not chase their prey. They did not need to. They fired, and ships died. The admiral watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated. What had once been the pinnacle of the Empire's military might was now little more than scattered wreckage. Communications were in chaos, desperate calls for retreat and reinforcement echoing across the channels. But no reinforcements would come. The Empire had not prepared for this. No one had. The admiral's hands clenched into fists as he realized the truth: humanity had never been defeated. They had simply been waiting, watching, allowing the Empire to believe it had won, lulling them into arrogance before unleashing their true strength. The Galactic Fleet was no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. It was prey. The realization sent a chill through the admiral's veins. There was no strategy that could save them now. The Dreadnoughts pressed forward, relentless, merciless, their silence more terrifying than any battle cry. They did not gloat. They did not revel in destruction. They simply erased their enemies, one ship at a time. The admiral's flagship shuddered as one of the Dreadnoughts adjusted its trajectory, its weapons locking onto him. The last thing he saw was the burning light of the weapon charging, an eerie glow reflecting in the vastness of space. The Empire had won its victory, but it had come too soon. Now, it was the humans who would decide how the war would truly end. The Galactic Fleet hovered triumphantly over the remnants of the once defiant enemy world, their ships gleaming under the distant light of a dying star. Wreckage from shattered defense stations drifted silently in the void, a testament to the overwhelming firepower brought to bear. Within the command ships, officers and high-ranking officials congratulated one another, basking in the afterglow of what they believed was a final, decisive victory. Celebrations erupted aboard the flagship, where admirals exchanged toasts, confident that their dominion over the contested territories was now absolute. Across the fleet, soldiers cheered, relieved that the campaign was over. The enemy had fought hard, but the outcome had never been in doubt. The Galactic Fleet was the mightiest armada ever assembled, a force that had crushed entire civilizations before. No species had ever recovered from a defeat of this magnitude. With the enemy's infrastructure obliterated and their warships reduced to drifting husks, the fleet had no reason to expect resistance. This was the moment they had awaited, the official declaration of supremacy over yet another system. As the admirals prepared their final address to the High Council, sensors across the fleet detected anomalies. It began as faint readings at the edges of the system, distortions in space that did not match any known celestial phenomena. At first, these disturbances were dismissed as aftershocks from the battle, the residual echoes of destroyed ships and planetary debris. But then the readings intensified. One by one, the fleet's long-range scanners flickered with ghost signatures, massive energy surges that seemed to emerge from nowhere. Communications officers struggled to make sense of the data. The fleet's artificial intelligence systems attempted to process the incoming information, but the readings made no sense. The distortions coalesced into something tangible. Space itself twisted unnaturally as if reality was being forced to accommodate something colossal. Then, without warning, they appeared. Towering vessels, black as the void, emerged from the rift in space, their hulls reflecting no light, absorbing it instead. They were unlike anything the Galactic Fleet had ever encountered. Their sheer size dwarfed even the command carriers of the victorious armada. These were not the remnants of a defeated foe, these were something else entirely. The bridge crews froze as the reality of what they were seeing set in. Earth's dreadnoughts had arrived. There had been whispers of Earth's last defenses, spoken of only in classified reports and dismissed as desperate exaggerations by intelligence analysts. The galactic powers had believed that humanity had exhausted its strength, that its fleets had been shattered, and that no reinforcements would come. They had assumed that the battle was won. They had assumed wrong. The dreadnoughts moved with terrifying precision, their formations flawless. They did not rush into battle. They did not broadcast threats. They simply arrived, an undeniable presence in the darkness of space, their hulls lined with weaponry that had never before been seen by the Galactic Fleet. They were a stark contrast to the delicate, intricate designs of the Empire's warships. These were instruments of war, built for one purpose alone. A tense silence fell over the command decks of the fleet as officers scrambled to react. Some hesitated, unable to process how an enemy presumed defeated could summon such overwhelming force. Others barked orders to charge weapons and form defensive lines. The admirals, moments ago celebrating, were now locked in grim contemplation, their faces pale. They had expected the war to end, but war had just arrived in its truest form. The first shot was not fired by the Galactic Fleet. It came from one of the Dreadnoughts, an energy beam of unthinkable magnitude, cutting through the void with surgical precision. The lead battleship of the victorious fleet barely had time to register the attack before it was reduced to nothingness. It did not explode. It did not crumble. It simply ceased to exist, as though reality had erased it from the battlefield. The Galactic Fleet erupted into chaos. Warnings and emergency alarms filled the airwaves. Captains shouted conflicting orders as their carefully maintained formations crumbled. The Dreadnoughts moved forward, relentless, unyielding, their weapons carving through the once invincible fleet as though they were merely clearing debris. The armada that had so confidently claimed victory was now the hunted, its warships turned from symbols of power into fleeing, desperate vessels seeking an escape that would not come. Among the survivors, there was no longer talk of conquest. There was no longer celebration. There was only the dawning realization that they had made a mistake that had just awakened something they had never wished to face. Earth had not surrendered. Earth had not been defeated. Earth had only been waiting. Point 1. The Galactic Fleet celebrates what they believe is a final victory, unaware that Earth's true military power has yet to reveal itself. 2. Earth's dreadnoughts emerge from space, their massive, ominous presence dwarfing the fleet, signaling that the war is far from over. 3. The first attack from the dreadnoughts annihilates a flagship instantly, plunging the once victorious fleet into chaos as they realize they are now the hunted. The Galactic Fleet floated triumphantly over the remains of the battlefield, its warships casting long shadows over the shattered world below. The once proud defenses of the enemy had crumbled beneath the relentless assault, leaving behind nothing but smoldering ruins and drifting debris. The victory had been absolute, decisive, a display of dominance that left no room for doubt. Aboard the command ships, officers and crew celebrated, raising glasses in toasts to their superior strategy and firepower. The high-ranking officials exchanged congratulations, reveling in the moment of conquest, their laughter echoing through the corridors of their massive vessels. To them, this was the final act, the closing chapter of a conflict that had threatened their empire's rule. Throughout the fleet, the mood was jubilant. Soldiers who had fought in the brutal campaigns leading up to this moment allowed themselves a rare respite. They had been told this war would test their might like no other, that the enemy was tenacious, unrelenting, but now, looking upon the ruined battlefield, they saw only confirmation of their supremacy. Reports came in from the surface, resistance was non-existent, infrastructure lay in ruins, and the last of the enemy's forces had been eliminated. All that remained was to announce their victory formally, to broadcast their triumph to the High Council so that the Empire might celebrate the fall of another defiant power. Across the fleet, banners of the Empire were displayed proudly, symbols of their might gleaming against the backdrop of space. There was no doubt in their minds that they had broken the enemy. No civilization had ever recovered from a defeat of this scale. The Galactic Fleet had crushed countless species before, and none had risen again once their worlds were razed, their fleets scattered, and their leadership executed. There was a finality to this battle, a sense of permanence that assured them of their own invulnerability. They had faced the supposed might of their enemy, and they had emerged victorious. Celebrations spread. Through the command decks, officers sharing drinks, reliving their most triumphant moments from the campaign. Some debated how history would remember this battle, whether it would be hailed as the greatest victory in the Empire's history. Others speculated on promotions, rewards, and the glory that awaited them upon their return home. Among the lower ranks, soldiers exchanged stories, laughed over past skirmishes, and boasted about their role in the final assault. In the hangars, pilots stood beside their ships, recounting dogfights that had secured their dominance in the skies above the shattered world. The fleet had become a city of revelry, its warriors basking in the pride of conquest. The fleet's admirals, gathered aboard the flagship, were already drafting their formal declaration of victory. The High Council would expect a detailed report of their triumph, a summary of their strategic brilliance and the decisive actions that had secured their dominance. Words of praise were prepared for the Emperor, declarations of loyalty and power that would reinforce the Empire's image as an unbreakable force. The battle had been long, hard fought, but ultimately, they had won, as they always did. On the bridge of the lead warship, an officer monitoring long-range sensors noted an unusual distortion at the edges of the system. At first, he dismissed it as residual energy from the battle, the remnants of destroyed ships leaving gravitational echoes in space. But the readings persisted, fluctuating in ways that did not match any known post-battle anomalies. He frowned, running additional scans, adjusting the parameters to account for interstellar debris. Yet, the distortions grew stronger, more pronounced, forming patterns that suggested something far more deliberate than mere battlefield residue. He hesitated before reporting it to his superior, not wanting to interrupt the ongoing celebrations over what was likely a minor technical anomaly. The fleet's communications arrays detected faint signals, unidentifiable but structured, hidden beneath the usual static of deep space. Encryption algorithms struggled to make sense of them, failing to match them with any known communication codes. The officer, now uneasy, forwarded the information to the command staff. Moments later, additional sensor stations across the fleet reported similar readings, fluctuations in space-time, gravitational shifts that suggested something immense was approaching. Yet, no visual confirmations appeared, no ships registered on standard tracking systems. It was as if something was there, just beyond the edges of perception, waiting. Aboard the flagship, the admiral overseeing fleet operations was informed of the irregularities. He listened, his expression shifting from amused curiosity to mild concern as reports poured in from multiple vessels. He dismissed initial fears of an enemy counterattack, convinced that nothing remained of their once defiant foe. Still, protocol dictated caution. He ordered an increase in scanning resolution, demanding clearer readings on whatever was causing the disturbances. Across the fleet, sensor arrays recalibrated, long-range scanners focusing on the coordinates where the anomalies had been detected. Silence stretched across the bridge as officers watched the data streams, awaiting confirmation of their suspicions. Then, space itself seemed to shift. A ripple ran through the void, distorting the stars, bending light in unnatural ways. What had been empty space moments ago now shimmered with an eerie presence, like a veil being pulled back to reveal something hidden beneath. Alarm klaxons erupted across the fleet as ships registered massive gravitational signatures emerging from the distortions. The celebrations came to an abrupt halt. Officers scrambled to their stations, soldiers abandoned their festivities, and the fleet that had moments ago basked in its victory now stood frozen in place, watching as something vast, something ominous, took shape in the darkness beyond. The first ship emerged in utter silence, black as the void itself, its surface absorbing all light. It did not resemble the wreckage of their defeated foe's fleet, nor did it match the design of any known civilization. It was larger than any vessel in the Galactic Fleet, its angular form bristling with unknown weaponry. Then another appeared, and another. More ships, each larger than the last, materialized from the rippling distortions, their formations precise, their movements deliberate. They did not broadcast hails or warnings. They did not respond to the fleet's automated identification requests. They simply arrived, their presence an undeniable force that now loomed over the so-called victors. The officers of the Galactic Fleet, who had moments ago raised glasses in celebration, now stood silent, their faces pale, their bravado drained. The battle they had believed to be over had only just begun. They had assumed their enemy was broken, that no retaliation would come. They had not expected this. They had never even considered the possibility that Earth had been holding back, waiting, preparing for the moment their true power would be revealed. The Galactic Fleet, which had always been the hunter, was now the hunted.